All right, folks, welcome to the runningrestaurants.com podcast, where we bring you the tips, tools, and techniques you need to know to make your restaurant more profitable and successful. I'm your host, Jamie Oikle. Today, got a great episode for you with Jackie Bebenroth, principal at Muse, which is all about brand strategy and content marketing. And I always love talking about marketing, so I'm looking forward to this. Jackie, tell me a little bit about your backstory, your company, and we'll dig in from there.
Certainly, Jamie. Well, thanks for having me today. My firm specializes in brand strategy and content marketing for food-related businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very familiar with organizations across the food system, from agriculture to manufacturing into restaurants and even advocacy. And so I always like talking to restaurant operators in particular because marketing can be so complex. It's almost like feeding a beast to market a restaurant. Everything always has to be on. You always have to stay top of mind. So I am also married to a restaurant operator. So
Okay.
I have that additional perspective from the couch at midnight of talking through, all of the many challenges of running a restaurant.
Well, I'm sure they get heated discussions there at home. So, all right. Well, let's. That's good. I'm glad you brought that up. That you have that background in on both sides of the fence. Let's talk about marketing because there's so many pieces of it, and I want you to direct it. And I'm going to kind of poke and prod, but branding strategy. I on your website, I know there's a graphic that talks about phases and things of that nature. But start off in general. Restaurants do, especially smaller restaurants, don't do a great job of telling their story, telling who they are, telling why they're different. Can you elaborate?
Sure. So what I found in working with restaurants is, number one, the first and foremost priority is making sure that the visual identity is right on target. So that impacts, that means your logo, your signage, your menu, your website, everything is consistent. It looks great. It's done in a professional way to reflect the quality of your menu and your experience. So when we work with restaurants, we often start there because ultimately that's the first impression that you have to the community, and you want to make sure that that's dialed in. Oftentimes, we have the saying, they eat with their eyes.
100%.
So within that sort of visual identity, we often include extra emphasis on food photography, even videography these days plays a big role to ensure that you've got a selection of ongoing images you can use in social, on your website, and all of those things. So our work in brand strategy, we do a lot of work in positioning and messaging, but for restaurants in particular, we do focus more and emphasize more the importance of your visuals to, again, reflect the quality of the experience.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's better now, but it used to be so bad. Like restaurants would have very poor photography. Like that's crazy. Your food is beautiful, your restaurant is beautiful. Get a good, of course, at least we all have pretty good cameras just sitting on our phones these days, but it's been surprising over time that people don't do that well and so forth. And now you talked about video. So let's stay in the photo video realm for a little bit more. How can restaurants get good photography? What should they look to shoot for video? Short form stuff, medium form stuff, long term, talk to the chef. Like, what are some ideas you think?
Well, I think one of the more resourceful and creative ways that I've seen restaurants go about building their photography library is by hiring influencers. Now, certainly you can hire an agency like mine. We'll definitely do that for you. But we found more and more often there's these social media influencers that specialize specifically in your community, and they take great pictures and video. And so you can double up on that. You can invite a number of influencers in for, say, a media-only event, put out your best dishes, have them, come in and take the pictures for their own feeds, but work a deal with them to also take pictures for you and your brand. And we've found that if you give them credit
Hmm.
when you're posting it on your website or social, you can often get that work at a discount. And it would cost less than working with a larger agency. Now, there's certainly places where an agency would be beneficial and you want that additional professional shine. But if you want to save some money and get a quick, maybe it's a day-long event and you get maybe a year's worth of video and photo content, plus you get all of that exposure through the influencer network. That is like, checking a bunch of boxes all in one. So that's a great tip, and I would encourage restaurant operators to evaluate that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It has the marketplace has really changed in that regard in terms of the
Mhm.
influencers and the audience size that average folks can have. It used to be, let me get big city glossy magazine to come into my restaurant, and it's really changed. And in fact, I think we just recently published a piece on influencers in the restaurant that had some good ideas as well. So look for that on the site. But how any tips on how to find those folks in a local marketplace?
Well, it's in your best interest to really look into your community and understand who's doing the food coverage on social. And it's relatively easy, just having your own Instagram account, which is absolutely a necessity for
Hmm.
restaurants these
Hmm.
days. Looking at different hashtags in your area,
Yep.
understanding where that coverage is coming from, and not just in your own maybe small community, but region wide as well. Um, you know, food is such a passionate subject for people,
It is.
and I just continue to be surprised by all of the free content that is put out into the world by these influencers just because they love the subject and they want to keep doing it and sharing it with the world.
Have you seen, or even at your husband's restaurant there, the usage of staff to create images and video at all, or just kind of picking up the phone and filming something for the special of the day, not getting too overly critical about it, and just kind of getting it out there?
That's a great point, Jamie. People value authenticity in social these days. You don't want to be too perfect
Mm.
and too produced. Now, there's a place for that
Yeah.
with more like high-end restaurants might go that route, or even chain restaurants. But for the most part, if you're a regional multi-chain independent, having maybe one of your core GMs be responsible for that and tuning them into the opportunities that they should be looking for on a daily basis. So the benefit of having someone in-house do that is they're on the scene all the time. They'll be able to just break their phone out, take some footage, upload it, and do things relatively quickly. The disadvantage is they may, because that's just one more thing you're adding to their list,
Mhm.
they may not be tuned into newsworthy, social worthy moments that are happening. So it's a good idea to have a plan for them and
Yep.
just get them to commit to a consistent cadence of X number of posts per week. Get them to understand what are some great topics that are aligned with your brand. If you're a chef forward brand, you obviously want to have more kitchen culinary perspective versus being more of a service forward brand. You might have more front of the house.
Appreciate that. Let's stick with the cadence there and the amount of content, because it can span from, you know, once a week recommendation to, hit them 5 times a day on different channels. Do you give any guidelines? Do you have any additional thoughts on how often people should publish to different channels and whatnot?
It truly depends on your market and how busy and saturated the restaurant scene is.
Yeah.
So, if, like in Cleveland, for example, we have a pretty spectacular culinary scene. We have a ton of independent restaurants here.
Hmm.
They're all posting on a regular basis. And if you're within that, you risk getting lost if you're only posting, say, once a week, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So, we would recommend clients in Cleveland really step that up and post multiple times. But if you're in a smaller market, it's really like a couple times a week, just staying current with the goal of staying top of mind when the moment strikes. When that question comes about, what do you want to have for dinner? Where do you want to go for dinner? You want to be top of mind, and perhaps you are because someone saw your post, versus if you weren't there, they might go to another, brand that's doing it at a greater frequency.
Yeah.
So that's always a challenge to kind of stay top of mind in the mix of everyone else. But that really is the true reason to invest in social.
Yeah, I find my brain defaults to three places, right? The first three places that I think about when we're coming home from practice to eat at. And if something doesn't disrupt my pattern, to think about something else, I just default to the easy three places. And then when it's Friday night, we're going out for special, and now it's like I'm thinking like 5 to 7 places, but you got to get into their pattern. And if somebody hit me a couple times that week, now they're in my pattern. They're in our our little text string of conversation where we're going to go. And yeah, if you're sitting outside of that conversation, you're just falling off people's thing. Because I know I can't keep too much in my head anymore. But
Oh, I know. And one thing I will say, just to add quickly to that, is people put a lot of time and effort in social. It's obviously a must-have for restaurants. But in content strategy and storytelling strategy, we call this building on rented land. And what's
yeah,
dangerous about investing in rented land, meaning your landlord is like Instagram, Facebook,
right.
they can change the rules at any time. And we've seen this over the years where it's become more pay to play. If you're boosting your posts, they'll be visible. And if not, you might not be as visible as you want.
Yeah.
So what we recommend is making sure that your social actually aggregates into your website, maybe on your homepage. So when someone goes to check out your menu, they're seeing all of your posts on your homepage, because that's how you maintain visibility for all of that effort you're putting in social. Because otherwise you just post and it sort of disappears. So make sure you're getting residual visibility from that. It's an easy thing you can do, and it pays off.
Yeah, it's a big deal. So I'm glad you said it. Something that I was thinking about yesterday was very similar in that you could build a big audience on Facebook or elsewhere, or Instagram, etc., and they can literally change their mind the next day, and that audience is gone. The algorithm changes, or they just TikTok might get canceled out of the US. I don't know, like that could happen. And
Right.
if that was your main strategy of attracting users, that just may disappear. So yeah, you need to have your own audiences, build your own email list, build your own SMS list, things like that. And you made a good point. Owned media versus stuff you control. You own those email addresses versus you're renting space on someone else's platform, or you're paying for advertisements on the radio or billboards or wherever. Those things, those rules can change. So you have something on your site called the Marketing Strategy Playbook. What's going on there?
That's right. So, today as marketers, we have so many options. There's so many different tactics you can choose. The question is, where do you spend your time and effort? And especially for restaurants where we're working with slimmer margins, there's not hundreds of
Very
thousands of
slim.
dollars to spend on marketing. Where do you get the best bang for your buck? And so our marketing playbook really helps, especially smaller businesses, orient their marketing dollars by asking real questions about their goals and their audiences, to just get those wheels turning and guide them into making the right decisions on how to allocate funds and resources.
Okay, I want to ask you a follow-up question there. When you ask restaurant operators, and you could talk about a couple examples. I know I saw some examples on your site. When you ask them about who's your audience, do they sometimes say, "Oh, it's blah," but they don't really have a good answer? Do you find that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and not to put you on the spot there or to throw anyone under the bus, but people don't do a good enough job identifying who their target is, who their audience is, and I'm sure you guys get to the heart of that. So why don't you stick there for a little bit?
Yeah, and this affects everything from the nature of your brand and the personality of your brand to the music you select in your restaurant. I remember going through this with my husband when we built his first restaurant brand, and we thought, who's coming in here? What do they want to listen to?
Mhm.
So it does, knowing who your target audience is so important to catering to that experience to them specifically. What I would recommend to restaurant operators is potentially doing an exercise where you select 2 to 3 audiences.
Mhm.
One audience might be, what is the profile of your regulars? And that customer or guest profile might be, they're geographically convenient. They have these things in mind when they're selecting a restaurant. And this is how we help them choose our restaurant as their usual place, their neighborhood place to go. Maybe young families with children, because you have a family-friendly menu. You have options for children. That could be another persona. Or maybe it's business travelers and you want to get those big expense accounts. So understanding who these people are and walking through what their motivations are for choosing your restaurant is very important. It helps you make brand and marketing decisions, but it also helps you make decisions about your menu and the experience that you provide.
Yeah. I'm going to kind of stay in the similar realm. I found a quote on your site that it stays in the same general area. It says, "We help leaders break through the limitations of perception and determine their brand's real underlying value." I wonder if you could talk more about that. I mean, people have a perception of what they are in the marketplace. It attaches to their brand. What do you think?
This is especially important for established restaurants that struggle to stay relevant,
Mm.
where all of these newer, modern, more modern restaurants are cropping up around them. You mentioned this email database earlier. This is a great tool not only to promote maybe events or LTOs or whatever it is that you have going on, but also reaching out to survey your guest database to help you understand their perception of your place. Where do they find the most value? Is it in your pricing and how your menu is priced? Is it in the menu itself? Is it in the specials? Is it in the great service at the bar with the bartender? Where do they find the most excitement? What makes them come in? One question that we encourage if you're doing a guest survey is, please tell us the first 3 words that come to mind when you think of a restaurant.
I like it.
And that alone will give you a sense of their general perception. And then you can determine yourself if you want to build on that or you want to shift that perspective in a different direction.
Okay. Appreciate that. Yeah. We're all guilty. A lot of folks are guilty of not talking to their audience enough to get that feedback. I know I am too. I haven't done a survey to ask for opinions on things in a while. So I think we can all kind of point our fingers at ourselves as well in that regard. And you can get that valuable feedback from the marketplace. I want to go, I took a note here. I want to go back to allocation for a second, because folks will say, I don't have money to advertise. I don't have money for marketing, or how much should I spend? My restaurant does $1 million of business. Should it be 4%? Should it be 5%? Should it be as much? Should I always spend money when I can make money in terms of return on investment? How do you think about it? Because like you talked about, margins are tiny in restaurants. I don't want to waste money. I want it to be effective. How do you counsel restaurants?
Yeah, there's no easy answer for this. What I will say, if you are a newer restaurant, your budget, your marketing budget should be bigger, because you have to climb the mountain of awareness within your community.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do that all with paid advertising. You can do that in very creative ways with PR and get free coverage. You can do it with that influencer program that I mentioned earlier. You can sponsor local events, show up and have a booth at your local farmers market, So it doesn't all have to be financial. It can be time and effort and donation. So when my husband was just building his reputation, we often committed to these pro bono events, right?
Yep.
And, doing these like sponsored events or fundraisers or whatever, the more awareness he built in the community, he was much more selective about the fundraisers that he contributed to, because he didn't need the exposure as much. So I don't have an easy answer for you in terms of it's 8% of your, net profit. It's really hard to say. It's based on how competitive the landscape is and how new your restaurant is. But for the most part, I always encourage restaurant owners to be very resourceful. And if they have the time and energy to find those freebies that will contribute exposure in the long run. Also, that quick point to PR, broadcast PR, these morning shows,
Mhm.
we get so much play out of these morning shows, like
Yeah.
going on and doing a little chef's demo with the local morning host. You'll get a quick hit of traffic that entire week, and then you can take that segment and post it on your website as well. So it's things like that. It doesn't cost you anything. All it costs you is the time it takes to get on the show.
Right. Yeah. And those last, like you said, you get that quick hit, but that lasts for a while. And then you can, for years, you could say, as seen on blah,
Right.
blah, blah morning show. So you can use those. Yeah. Very good advice there that you can get creative. You can do guerrilla marketing. It doesn't all have to be about spending a big amount in one media platform, hoping that it works out. Try a bunch of different things, especially if you're a smaller operator, dip your toes in a few categories and pull some users from each area. But yeah, there's the school donations, the team donations, there's so many opportunities to become part of your community. And to your point is great. I mean, when you're full and busy, you can be more selective about those things. But in the beginning, don't close any doors and so forth. So a couple other notes I have, but before I do that, anything we haven't hit on that you want to hit on more directly, marketing wise, thought wise, umbrella size? What do you think? Although there's a whole other brand of content marketing that you can get into. What do you think?
Well, earlier in our discussion today, you mentioned this concept of storytelling, and I think we can talk about its place in your world of how you share your brand narrative. And what I will say, in working with clients, some of which who have like origin stories, and they have these wonderful like histories that they want to share with the world. Other restaurants we've worked with have like really strong culinary philosophies that they feel strongly about placing forward in their brand messaging. What I would say is, people often select first on like the experience of the restaurant. Am I going to get an excellent meal quickly at a good price? Am I
Yep.
going to have a great service experience, right? You have to hit those marks first. And your reviews are key in that. And so that is the decision-making process. Is it convenient to where I'm located?
Mhm.
That's all of that shallow stuff that people think about. When you get them in the door, that's when you have the opportunity to share more stories, whether it's the server standing at the table telling the story about the sourcing, or perhaps it's a little blurb on the menu talking about the family and the heritage where this menu is inspired by. I believe the best storytelling happens when the guests are already in the door. You can't expect guests to care about that until they get there and you check those boxes on what it is they're really coming in for to begin with.
Yeah, the thing that I was thinking about as you were talking there, the experience as a whole, if you spend money and drive people into your restaurant and the experience stinks and the food stinks, then everything is not going to work. So you certainly have to be dialed in all respects. You have to be dialed in on your operation side as well. Your costs have to be in line, because if you drive in a bunch of traffic but it's unprofitable, that doesn't work either. So it's a chicken and egg, of course. But once you have stuff ready, that you're ready to drive traffic in, that experience and the review. We could do a whole hour just on the review process, I'm sure. And we do have some content on our site from the Yelp folks and others. That is a big piece, especially for restaurants. That people go there first, right? Google reviews, Yelp. It is a big deal. So hopefully you're paying attention to your reviews, folks.
Yes, and one more quick note on that, because I think this is an important point to make about the purpose of storytelling. When good stories are told and people believe in them, they are way more likely to spend more money.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
if you've had to elevate your price points for one reason or another, that storytelling component is extra important to help people understand why you've made those decisions. You don't have to tell them, my cost of labor went up and my supply chain is
Yeah,
crazy,
right.
but like help them understand the thought and intention that has gone into this experience, and they're likely to pay more and not complain about it.
Good point. That's a good point. Question for you, if you want to share any kind of case studies, or I did have a question about, you had something on your site. If folks ever go through a rebrand, like maybe they want to change their content or pivot or change their logo and their colors. That's a big decision. How do you go about something like that?
Oh my gosh, it's a big decision and it's so expensive and time
Mm-hmm.
consuming, but it's important. And so I have 2 points about that. The first is you should look at your brand like an asset of the company. Just like you look at your equipment in the kitchen, it depreciates over time. So smart operators are putting money aside to reinvest in their equipment. I recommend the same approach for the brand. The brand supports the overall marketing budget, but it's a different budget because it doesn't necessarily result in instant ROI.
Mm-hmm.
Your brand investment is not going to drive people in the door tomorrow, but it's going to keep them coming in the door. So that's my first important point. The second important point I'd like to make is you don't always have to completely overhaul your logo in your interior design of your restaurant, make those big expensive changes to make a difference and stay relevant. You could change and continue to renovate your menu. You can change and continue to innovate with technology that makes service quicker. And you can continue to market those updates to people in new and exciting ways to stay relevant. So we do a lot of work with Nestle Professional,
Mm-hmm.
and so they are very big on helping large scale restaurant operators continue to renovate their menus for relevancy. And the larger chains are doing this all the time. They could be doing it
Yeah.
seasonally. They're doing it a couple times a year. So those are very important considerations as it relates to your brand that may not require, like I said, a big overhaul, but certain things you can do within the restaurants to continue to evolve with the times.
Right, right. Good. Jackie, we've covered a lot. I want to go to either parting thoughts or wisdom, a book recommendation or anything in that regard, or just a resource to point people to. Anything in that realm you can touch on, and then we'll kind of wrap up.
Oh, wow. I encourage all of our clients to watch the Simon Sinek TED Talk on Start With Why.
Mm-hmm.
His whole methodology is about people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And we've found, especially in the food world, if you have a purpose and a why behind your story, that ultimately keeps people coming in the door for much longer. It creates loyalty and increases your guest lifetime value in many different ways. So that would be number one. And then that book, Unreasonable Hospitality, I'm sure you're familiar with it. And I have actually given that as a gift to many of my clients because it not only applies to the restaurant world, but just great service
Mm-hmm.
across the board. So I found that to be recently my favorite read.
Good. Oh, good stuff. Appreciate those too. All right. So we were remiss in not doing it directly. I have it in my closing notes, but hit people with your website or any social channels you'd like to send them to.
Sure. So we're at museheadquarters.com. Again, we work with typically multi-chain restaurants and also, bigger food manufacturers as well these days. And then you can find us on Instagram at Muse Headquarters. You can find me at Jackie Bebenroth on LinkedIn.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so we'll include some of those links for folks. That was Jackie Bebenroth, principal at Muse. You can find them at museheadquarters.com for more great restaurant marketing and service people tech tips. Stay tuned to us here at runningrestaurants.com. In the meantime, do us a favor, give us a like or subscribe or a review. That really helps us get the podcast out. So with that being said, we'll sign off. Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Jamie.